Joining in. I'm Letty Swank and I work for the co-op. And hello, I'd like to introduce you to our webinar today, Help for Your Homeschool, Math Advice from an Expert. Please join me in welcoming today's host, Nadim El-Rahi from CTCMath. Nadim has degrees in mathematics and economics and has been on the team at CTCMath for the last 7 years. He has enormous admiration for homeschoolers, and he's generously offered to share his math expertise with us today. This is your opportunity to get all your questions asked about how to teach math. From anxiety to mastery, everything is on the table. If you want to go ahead and type your questions into the chat box, we will answer as many as time allows. We will be sending out a recording of the webinar, so if you miss anything, don't worry. You will have an opportunity to revisit anytime you like. So I think I will, we have Hi from New Jersey. Hi, New Jersey, thanks for joining us. Okay, well, why don't I kick it off, because I do have a few questions that members sent in beforehand. So Nadim, so let's say I have my own math anxiety as a teacher. So how do I get over that when I'm teaching my child?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first of all, it's so good to be with you guys. I really appreciate being on this call, and it's always a good chance for me to also learn and hear from you guys out there. And so please, let's try to make this as interactive as possible. I'm here to help, but I'm also here to learn as well. But yeah, math anxiety is one of those things where I find that it really comes down to confidence. So no matter what your age is, and if it tends to kick in when you don't have the confidence, or and that confidence generally comes from understanding. You might have, rewind the clock, as a student might have struggled with it, or might not remember it, or might not understand it, and that won't leave you feeling too confident about teaching it. And as a result, that anxiety might kick in. I think, for starters, just being honest. I think if you're just being honest to yourself, being honest to your children, I think that goes a long way. I think that takes the pressure away, and will certainly help to make things flow during the homeschool day and while teaching math. And there are plenty of resources out there. So use the resources, rely on the resources, and work on your knowledge. Work to build on your knowledge. I know as homeschoolers, we tend to be very time poor and it's very difficult, but learn with your child as well. The earlier grades, they seem to be the okay ones. They're all right to get through, but it's when you get to those upper grades that it gets a bit more difficult. So build on your skills as you teach your children, as you progress through grade levels.
Great. Okay, here's another question. Spiral versus mastery math. Which is the best approach?
Yeah, great question again. Look, in short, both are very important and both have their place. Maybe if I just define what each one is to begin with, just so we all understand. So mastery is when you focus on one particular concept. You focus on one particular concept. Spiral is when you build on concepts. So you incorporate previous concepts taught in math. So both are important, but when do you adopt each one? I think when it comes to the teaching component, mastery is very important. To focus in on one particular concept and hone in on that concept. For a few reasons, it keeps the lesson short, so you're not introducing too many things and confusing the child. You're keeping it short and to the point, and it's a lot easier for the child to understand. But when doing the problems, the very nature of math is a building block, as I was explaining in my previous question. So it's important that you have the foundations there and you build on those foundations. So I think it's very, very important to incorporate revision and practice problems from previous topics or previous grade levels even, that will help with that spiral approach. So when teaching, I believe the best method is mastery. When practicing problems, that's when the spiral comes in, just to make sure those concepts are consolidated from previous years and to incorporate revision. There's weekly revision tasks out there once a week that are sit down, one page question type style worksheets that are great for students, and revisiting previous topic diagnostic tests and topic tests. That's super important.
Great. So actually this question's near and dear to my heart because my daughter, when she was younger, actually hated math and didn't like it and didn't think she was a math person. So how do you convince a child that might think that they're just not a math person?
Yeah. I think this is this stems a bit from what I also said previously, and that's confidence. Confidence is just so important. And I might end up using this word quite a few times while we talk, but it really is, because when a child has confidence, you see the aha moments. When you teach them and you're explaining a concept, and when they really get it, you see that light bulb just click and turn on, and those aha moments really registering on a child. And the whole body language changes at that point. You're not born in this world hating math, I don't think. It's a difficulty that arises for various reasons. Different students have different natural abilities. Different students have different learning patterns. They might have had a previously poor experience to education and not being taught those fundamental concepts, and that's where students really get unstuck with in math. So that's why it's super important that when you're considering your curriculum or considering the program or your program for the year, to really have access to those previous grade levels so you can build upon them if needed. And conversely, if the student's flying, don't hold them back. Just because they're in grade 4 but they're doing really well, progress, and go at the student's pace. That's super important. So I think back to the question, confidence is super important. Once you start to explain, once they start to get those explanations at the level that they need, and they start getting those aha moments, that will really start to switch on and appreciate math, I think, and enjoy it a bit more.
So let's so then this other question is related sort of to those aha moments, right? So how do I know when my child truly understands a concept?
Yep. I think when they're working through the problems on their own, that is a very clear indication. Encourage conversation, but it doesn't just have to be that way. I think encourage conversation with them. One mistake we can make when teaching math, or one really big problem, and I'm so guilty of this when teaching math, is getting frustrated. Children cannot sense frustration it's really important that the children don't sense any frustration on the parents' part. In saying that, it's super difficult to do. But if they start to sense that frustration, then it makes it difficult for them to come to you with questions. That they'll be scared and afraid to do that. And this will go beyond math, I'm sure. This will go into their later years and much more important issues. So if you sense that frustration creeping in, if you've tried to teach a concept using 2 or 3 different methods and it's just not working, take a break. I think that's super important. Take a break and revisit it tomorrow, or go on to a different subject, or do something, or just take a 10-minute, 15-minute breather. I was speaking to a homeschool mum just last week, and she said, yes, the frustration was creeping in, and they decided to just go, okay, let's bake some cookies. How good's that? How good's that? Just changing the entire mood of the sort of the homeschool day, and bringing something fun, and enjoying it. And they were actually working on measurement, so they sort of anyway. They were still introducing some math concepts when they were baking the cookies.
Well, and as we know, we have lots of ways to do that.
Yeah.
When we're home teaching math. So let's talk a little bit more about how to make math fun, and from your experience, what have you seen?
Yeah, I think it's super important to first see what your children naturally like, what they're interested in. I still do. I love cars. I love cars. So one thing that I find that I found really fun as a kid was doing surveys of the types of cars that would drive past, and really living math like that, and doing a little table and then graphing it afterwards, and that was fun for me. Also, growing up, I realized that I liked statistics. So I didn't realize at that young age, but of course the two went hand in hand, cars and statistics, and it was great. Another thing I like is as an adult is finding bargain buys and making sure that I get the best deal possible. So working out best buys when I'm at the supermarket, and it makes interesting times when I go with my wife Tamara. It's very fun. But now in Australia, actually, sorry, I'm a bit of a side story. But now in Australia, actually, they actually list the price per unit, so per 100 grams, or whatever it may be. I'm not too sure if it's like that in the US, but they list the unit price. So they've done all the work for you, but I still I still like to try to work it out myself and work out which is the value buy. But make it interesting by living it. So working out what your child likes. If your child likes nature, go out, collect some sticks and leaves and whatnot, and bounce rocks across the lake, and try to live math in nature, in the kitchen. My little daughter loves cooking, and do it by measuring things out, and quantifying things, there's all sorts of things. My father-in-law's an engineer. He loves showing us the structural. You can see the passion on him, on his face when he talks about it, and talks about how things work structurally. So it's really important, I think, to make math fun is to first work out what your children naturally like, and then try to live it and bring it to life in your day.
Oh, great. And we do have the.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, you go, lady.
Yeah, we do have that unit per unit,
Yeah.
at the grocery stores. And I'm always amazed when the smaller is actually cheaper than the bigger one. So, yes,
Yeah.
in some cases when they put the smaller ones on sale.
Yes.
So anyway, what do you see as the number one sort of roadblock that students face when they're learning math?
Definitely confidence. Yeah.
Okay.
Without a doubt, 100% confidence. And just going back to, sorry, I just as I passed it back to you, lady, I had a thought of I just remembered board games are a great way to make math enjoyable. Board games and card games, and bringing that into the day, and strategy games. Yeah, I think that's a great way to make math enjoyable. I used to love Monopoly. I still do. It's banned, but from my siblings and I, we cannot play it. It ends in a big contest.
Too competitive.
Way too competitive.
So, okay, so sort of along those same lines. So, how would I encourage scientific thinking maybe problem solving skills. Obviously, board games are great for that, or even card games. Anything else that, during math lessons that might be useful, like actually during a lesson?
Mm. Yeah, good question. I think it is important to actually make sure it's very easy as a teacher to avoid the problem solving style questions because they are often the ones that are difficult for the students because they sort of involve not just you need to interpret the question to begin with. It's not as simple as interpreting 5+7 and then putting the methodology in to solve it. So with the problem solvings, you first need to break down the question and then apply the methodology. So there's sort of a multi-stage approach there. I think first and foremost is to ensure that you introduce it in question form. And this will come more naturally. This is where the students who naturally excel in math will have the advantage. But starting at the level that they understand and working up from that, trying not to avoid it, and trying to incorporate a few problem-solving questions in each concept that you teach. So once you've taught the 5+7, then go into I have 5 lollies. My sister has 7. How many do we have together if we combine them? Type thing. Obviously, very simplified problems, but just taking that concept and applying the problem-solving element to it. And yes, there are the board games, there are the strategy games, and having discussions about them. I'm also a soccer coach, so I enjoy coaching soccer, particularly the tactical side of things, and so when I say, okay, play high press, or I give them some tactical information, and then we do it on the field, we then have a discussion whether it worked or didn't work, and then why it worked. So when you play a board game, have a discussion about why that was the right move or why it wasn't the right move, because it just gets them thinking a little bit deeper. It gets them thinking about, instead of automatically making that move, it might make them stop and think, well, why should I make that move, or why shouldn't I make that move? And that's really important to just get the brain switched on. I'm not encouraging a particular type of thinking. It's more engaging the brain and not just mindlessly going about things.
Great. Okay, so how much time should I spend on math per day?
Yeah.
And I know you said if it needs to be put aside, do that, but do you have some recommendations on a good amount of time?
Yeah, I think let's make it simple. Let's break it up in K to 6 and then 7 and above. I think there's no hard and fast rules. Each child requires different. Each child is unique, and this might not apply to them. But I think in general, if you keep it to 3 or 4 lessons a week, and you time that lesson at about 45 minutes for K to 6, I think that's a winner. So 3 to 4 45-minute lessons a week. Grade 7 and above, I think you have to be doing 4 lessons, but this is where it gets important, is increasing the length of the lesson, just to get them concentrating a bit longer and having that engage and that mind working a little bit longer. So I would actually push the lesson to an hour, and then see if they can sustain 1.5 hours at some point. And at some point, you might even want to, as they get older, have a 1.5 to 2 hour lesson. I know that can be a bit much, but I'm talking about those students who are studying calculus and really higher grade levels of math. Now, what do you do with that 45 minutes? I think that's the key question. I think that's the more important question to be answered, not how much or when we should be doing math, but what we should be doing during our math lesson. This, I think, applies more generally to all students as well. I believe it's super important to keep the instruction short and concise. So if we do work with that 45-minute time frame, it is far more effective to have a 5-minute explanation, 5, maximum 10-minute explanation for those K to 6. You don't want to be going more than 10 minutes, you're going to lose them. And then getting them to have 35 to 40 minutes of practice problems. To really use the majority of the lesson to practice problems. That's where they're going to do the majority of their learning. That's when they get hands-on. That's when more questions will arise and you start to get a gauge of their level of understanding. Now, that is far more effective than a 30-minute explanation and 15 minutes of practice problem. I guarantee you, you have them lost after 5 minutes. If you're explaining a concept in primary level for more than 5 minutes, you're either explaining too many different concepts. I believe you're either explaining too many different concepts, or you're going on a tangent. You're overloading them with information on the one concept, which is not required. Short, sharp, concise explanation. See how they go. If that doesn't work, they might need an alternative method, and there are alternative methods. But keep it to the one to begin with. And if they get it, great, move on. Fantastic. The job is to just build that understanding. It's not to rewire their brain. It's just to build that understanding. Now, if they don't get it, that's when we start looking into different approaches. You might have a super gifted child who really enjoys math, who really loves it, who really wants to know the other methods, who really wants to get a gauge on those. But I'm talking about probably the top 5%, top 5 to 10%. That's when I would encourage multiple methods and multiple different explanations. But I think they have to be asking for it. Keep it short, keep it concise. That's more important than how should we structure or when should we have these, how long the lessons should go for. And in saying that, the 3 to 4 lessons a week, they don't all have to be instruction based. You might only want to do, so say we work with 4 lessons. You might want to, every fortnight, one of those lessons just be pure revision, or even 1 lesson a week, pure revision. 3 instructional lessons with the practice problems to go along with it. And then the last lesson of the week, revision from earlier grades or previous topics. I hope that makes sense, but I sort of touched on a few different things there, but I thought it was really important. But feel free to ask questions. If anything that I'm saying right now, we can see the chat box. So if you've got any questions about what I'm saying, or you want me to go in depth into something I've said, please ask. I'm friendly.
Yeah, so the chat box is on the bottom and you should see it. So maybe if anybody else wants to type in, Maribel did, so we think it can be seen by everyone. But raise your hand if you're not seeing it. Oh, here we go. Yes, thank you, SC. So what about algebra and higher? Sort of, what should be, how should it be structured, and what should the lesson look like?
Yeah, I think Algebra 1, you're still probably looking at 3 to 4 lessons, but trying to get it up to the hour mark. Algebra 2 and beyond, you want to try to be doing 4 lessons. Certainly 4 lessons, and you want them to be going for about an hour. You want to be getting lots of practice and lots of revision, and you really want to be working. You really want to be getting lots of practice and revision. That's super important. Does that sort of answer the question?
Wait, we're typing away here a little bit. Sorry.
No, you're right. Oh, I can see. Some people can't see the chat box.
Yeah, but we can see you. So, yay.
Very good.
Okay, so feel free to type in. Erin, I didn't know if you have a question, but feel free to type away. So basically, because we only have so much of Nadim's time, let me ask another question. So this was actually from a member that we asked. So it might be a little bit too, it might be specific, but it says, how do I determine the order I present concepts to my child? So I guess that's a very general question, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you really have to follow the order of the curriculum that you're using, or the text. Yeah, whatever curriculum you're using, you have to trust in that, because I think if you start creating the textbook or the curriculum, so I mean, I don't want to get. So we at CTCMath, when we created the curriculum, we didn't just put them all together randomly. And I think anyone who creates a curriculum wouldn't have that approach. There would be a systematic approach where concepts build on one another. And I don't think you want to change the order too much unless it's needed. What you might need to do is revisit particular concepts. So a student might be struggling with the algebra component, and you might want to revisit, or whole numbers, or a particular topic, and you might want to in 5th grade. So you might want to bounce back to 4th grade and attempt those questions. But in terms of the order, I think you have to trust the curriculum that you're using. It's really important, because if you start to move things around, it might make things more difficult for you. By all means, revisit earlier concepts to build on that knowledge if required, if it's too difficult. But don't be rearranging lessons too much, especially if it's a spiral program, because then you'll find concepts that haven't been taught yet.
Okay, we have another panel, another question in the chat. So do you have any recommendations for preparing for PSATs or SATs and ACTs? So those are, we were talking them actually, SC, at the beginning before everyone joined us, about test prep. So I don't know, maybe in Australia, do they have something similar for universities?
Yeah, we do. We have what's called the HSC, the Higher School Certificate. Look, at the end of the day, you need to actually train the child to be ready to sit an exam, to sit a test. And I'll talk about tests in general. And that's why I was alluding to earlier about ramping up the length of the lesson. You need to be able to concentrate for extended periods of time. It's if your lessons are 30 minutes long and then you sit a 2.5 or a 2-hour exam or a 3-hour exam test, and this will extend to college life as well, then you're going to find yourself short, because the brain is only concentrated to learn for those shorter periods of time. Preparation, it's important to do plenty practice problems, plenty practice tests, to see the material that they are actually examining, and make sure that that material is covered comprehensively, to train the brain to be able to concentrate for those prolonged periods of time. So put yourself in that, when I say sit a practice test, sit it in the same conditions, the same time required, in the same format, in a quiet room where there's no distractions. Have it marked properly, and then go over that. See, I can get into specific tips about how to approach it, whether to start from the beginning and go to the end, or spot the easier questions and do those. But that really comes down to an individual case by case, I think. So I really want to be really general about the question, answering the question. I don't want to get into specifics, because I don't want to give the wrong advice for a particular type of student.
Okay, so we have one question. Let me just go over to my window here. Um, so we talked a little bit at the very beginning about a parent that has math anxiety, right?
Mm,
But this is a bit more specific with, and this particular member says, you know, her biggest struggle is with math,
mhm,
and she was not a good math student. So, you know, how does a parent like that actually who struggled with math, and I know we talked about don't show your frustration, right? Um,
mm.
but then, you know, what, any other advice to sort of give that kind of uh, teacher? You know, how do you make it enjoyable for the teacher as well as the student?
Yeah, yeah. We hear from countless parents who are just in the same predicament or situation as you, Aaron. Um, I think it's really important to find a curriculum. All the suggestions that I made earlier certainly apply, and Letty, you just summarised those really well. And I could see you reference some of them, Aaron. So you heard those. But I also think that taking it to the next step, finding a curriculum that really supports you and your children. Find a curriculum that does the teaching for you. Find a curriculum that has the video tutorials that that means that your children are not dependent on you to get the explanations, and work with it. Learn along, listen in, and work with it. And then finding a curriculum that has work solutions is really important as well, particularly for those upper grade levels. So you can really find and pinpoint where, if you make a mistake, where you went wrong. Um, Teaching math is by far, the feedback we get is by far the most difficult subject to teach in a homeschool day. And I think the first step in overcoming that is by finding the right curriculum.
Great. Okay, so what we talked about a couple mistakes that teachers can make, but it would be good to talk about other things to look out for. You know, either in selecting a math product. You know, we talked about finding the right approach for your child. So you mentioned, you know, videos. Um, you know, can you comment on sort of ways in which you can select a math curriculum?
Mm, yeah, yeah. I think if you have a struggling child, the first thing you need is a math curriculum that covers all grade levels. I think if you have a child who's struggled with math and struggled for a prolonged period of time, if you've jumped from curriculum to curriculum, it's important that you get all grade levels included in that, because you're going to have gaps and holes that need to be filled. Um, I would look for that firstly. Then I would make sure that and this applies to all students, not just the struggling ones, that the video, it's important to have the video tutorials, but the students still need to relate and understand the teacher, and really appreciate the style of learning that's being taught. So watch a few of the video tutorials. Get your children to watch them. Watch them watching it. See if they do understand it. See how they react. See if they have that aha moment, those light bulbs switch on. I think that is important to see how they interact and react to what they see on the screen. Ask plenty of questions. Ask plenty of questions. I also think it is important to find, and then the next stage after that is to find a curriculum that then supports supports you in the practice side of the problems, practicing the math problems. So after the concept's been taught and they have to practice those concepts, well, how does the curriculum do with that? Does it provide the feedback that's required? Does it provide the correct reporting? Does it provide work solutions? Are there ample enough questions to work through? Is there revision built in? There's a lot of factors to consider when looking at a curriculum, but I think they're the three cool ones. I think they're the three big ones. The rest are bonuses, and some are really great bonuses. Yeah.
Great. And along the same sort of theme there, so we have a question. My child struggles with retaining math concepts.
Mm.
They're taking pre-calculus this year. Is there
Mm.
something you can suggest in helping them understand and retain these concepts? Should I pair a virtual program with their current book?
I would love to know what current book you're using at the moment. Is that possible? And the answer would be, why are you typing that?
Becca.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yes, I would. Yeah, I really would. Unless you're doing the teaching yourself, unless you're teaching the concepts yourself, it's very difficult to learn from a textbook. So the most effective.
She is direct teaching. So
you are direct teaching.
Yeah.
Great. Now, are you teaching straight from the textbook, or are you up on the board teaching without the textbook? You might be using it as an aid, but are you sitting down with the textbook in between you and teaching the concept as you read the textbook, or are you up there on the board teaching it yourself without, where only you might be referring to the textbook? Sorry, I might just wait for that answer because I think it makes a difference.
Yeah, and Kay's writing to the panelist box, so you should see it.
While Kay is doing that.
Here she is.
Great. Okay, both the book on the board and we read it together, and I provide additional supporting examples. Okay, I think it's really important to try to keep the textbook out of it when teaching the concepts. I think you have to try to teach it in a natural ordered, natural way. I think you can have the textbook to guide you, but if the student is seeing textbook and instructions from you, they might get a little bit confused, and rather than, and as a teacher as well, you can get, it's very easy to just be drawn into doing an example problem, thinking that they're learning rather than actually teaching. I hope I'm making sense. I can get up and I can explain a math problem, okay? And I can do it step by step. And the student will know how to get from line 1 to line 2, line 2 to line 3, line 3 to line 4. They'll understand all the steps. But then ask them to get to line 1 to line 4 by themselves and they don't get it. That's because they haven't learned the concept in its entirety correctly. And you see this time and time again, especially in pre-calculus and up. And that might mean that you're teaching line by line or teaching a problem and working and using the textbook as you go along, rather than being up there teaching the concept in its entirety. And because when you take that holistic approach, you go into more detail and you provide the student with more content and knowledge to understand the problem. I hope that makes sense. It's sort of one thing. It's could be one thing that you're doing or not. I would try video instructions. I would just give it a go, see how they respond, see if that works, change it up a bit if they're struggling to retain the information, and try the video tutorials. And you might just, on a personal note, you might want to just have a look at a few different video tutorials and how a few different teachers might teach a particular concept, and just have a look at how you teach it. By no means this is not criticism, but just offering you support. And you might take out some pointers as to how you can teach it in a more holistic approach, using a more holistic approach.
Okay, so any Any other questions from the group? Give them a couple minutes.
I'm glad that was helpful.
And then, yeah, she said that was helpful.
Awesome. I think with video tutorials, it does take the pressure off as well, the parents. By all means, I'm not saying that rely solely on the video tutorials. You are the primary educator. You are the primary educator. So you can have it, and different parents use them in different capacities. You might have the video tutorial up there. They watch the whole video tutorial and you just say, okay, go away, do the questions. Great, you understand it. Or you might want to provide additional support, or you might want to ask, okay, you know, did you understand that? What parts did you understand? I think it's great having a student teach a concept back to you. So if you get them to watch the video tutorial, you might, especially in pre-calculus and the upper grade levels, you might want to then get them to teach the concept back to you. And I would give that a go. Okay, sorry, that thought just entered my mind. I used to teach a lot of students privately, one-on-one, and I would always use that technique when they were struggling to retain concepts. Just have them teach it back to you, get some thinking on a deeper level, and it makes them go, oh, okay, not only do I need to sort of understand what's going on here, but I actually have to teach it. One of my past teachers who was teaching, who found himself in a difficult situation where the school was short on teachers and was teaching the grade level which he was not qualified to teach. Everyone knew it, everyone understood it, but even the students, but they just had to sort of deal with the situation that they were in. So the way that he did that was that he had some very gifted students. It was a talented year level, and it was a really high level of math. He would get the students to go home and study the concept. He would also go home and study the concept that night. And then in the lesson, he would have the children teach the concept. And then he would jump in at the very end and sort of polish it and refine it. So they were all teaching each other effectively. They were coming together as a group of students and a teacher, and they were all teaching one another.
Great. Okay, this is from SC. How do you know how much practice is enough?
Yeah, when it starts to sort of, when you're starting to get, 10 in a row all correct, I think you can move on. Sort of when it starts to get boring, when they absolutely know it. Now, they might not absolutely get it. They might still be making mistakes, but they've done a lot of problems. If they've been doing 30 minutes of practice problems in that lower grade level, you want to move on, and then you might bring that concept back because you don't want to bore them over and over with the same thing. You want to also move on. So when is it enough? Well, when it starts to become a bit boring, I think, or when they've mastered it. And then when they've mastered it, it also becomes boring because they're not being challenged. They're not learning new things. Upper grade levels, I think that threshold has to be extended a bit more. By the very nature, the problems take a little bit longer to calculate. So, the time it takes to do 10 questions in second grade for a second grader would be far shorter than what it would take for a student in calculus to do 3 problems for a student in calculus. By the very nature of the question, they have multi-parts, they're a lot longer, they require a lot more working out.
Great. Okay, well, we are coming, we have a few more minutes if people want to ask some questions. I do want to ask a more general question, just in, because for everyone on, Nadim is in Australia, which is why we are having the webinar at this time. But can you tell us a little bit about the homeschool community in Australia, and is it growing? And from a co-op perspective, we do see more products for homeschoolers coming from Australia.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Curious about that.
No, and got a lot, as you said in your introduction, I got a lot of love and admiration for the homeschool community. I think when you sort of take it upon yourself to educate your children, you are showing a lot of love there, and a lot of courage, and kudos. The homeschool community here in Australia is growing. It is growing. It is still relatively small, but it is growing. Now, Australia works a little bit different. I've always said that if I was in the US, living in the US, without a doubt, I would be homeschooling my children. In Australia, each and every school, whether it's independent, private, religious, so part of the Catholic school system, they all receive government funding. Public schools are entirely government funded, but the independent and private schools also do receive government funds. So those schools then go to the parents for the balance of the funds to educate their children. So sending a child to a school with the same core belief system or same ethos is a lot more affordable in Australia than it is in the US. So you have a lot more options there. So I think that's the main reason why homeschooling isn't as big in Australia. But more and more, as we see, time goes on, government starts to introduce particular programs where students are forced to learn about certain things, and that is making parents go, well, I don't want my children to learn this. I need to take control of the situation. And homeschooling is growing as a result of that, and it's growing in particular states because of that. And it's a great network here. Some of my closest friends homeschool their children, and to see them flourishing, and of course they are using our math program, and checking in on them. It's fantastic. It's great to see, and it is a growing community. We are a close community as well. Yeah, there are a lot of programs coming out of Australia, which is good. Could only be a good thing.
Okay, great. Well, I know it's dinner time in some places, and
Sure.
people are getting ready to probably take care of dinner, at least on the West Coast. So thank you, Nadim. I will ask the group if there's any other last questions. You can get them in, but we do appreciate you taking the time to spend some time with our membership today. And then I think I noticed in some of the comments, people are using CTCMath, so they're already using the program. So, but then for anyone else that's interested in it, we do offer it at the co-op. It's at homeschoolbuyerscoop.org. You can just use the search box, and we have a great deal on it. So, again, everyone, thank you for attending. And if you will get the replay if you missed any part of it, and that should be sent out the next day. Oh, wait, no, we have some late questions here. So there's a question on using CTCMath. Is that Megan for CTCMath? Is there a placement exam?
Yeah. Okay.
How do you place your child? So
great. In CTCMath?
Yeah.
So we don't believe in one placement test, one exam that sort of tells you that, okay, here are all the problems, and this is where your child should be in which grade level. The reason being is that if you took a 1 hour or 2 hour exam, it's not going to fully diagnose your child. So what we do is we have a series of diagnostic tests. So when you click into a particular topic, you will see that there's a diagnostic test at the very top. So on average, we have about 15 topics in each grade level. I'm talking a bit quickly here because I think Megan done that. Okay, no worries. Yeah, so take that diagnostic test. It produces that report. From that report, it will highlight any lessons that you need to look at. That's a far more in-depth and comprehensive way, and it just makes sure that there's absolutely no gaps left. And with CTCMath, you do have access to all levels from all grades, so you can go in and fill those gaps really easily. But then you'll eventually find yourself at the correct grade level, and once you do that, you just work through the lesson order.
Okay, and then we do also have another CTC. So question, so it says, is it a standalone or does it need to be supplemented in the upper grades?
No, it certainly is a standalone. When we first launched in the US about 4 years ago, I think, 7 years ago, for the first 2 or 3 years, it was a supplement for upper grades. We've introduced 190 new lessons. There's new imperial lessons being introduced at the moment. We have the question bank wizard where you're able to create your own worksheets, custom worksheets. So all these things have contributed to it being a standalone curriculum. Kathy Duffy, it's CTC is part of the top 102 curriculum picks. If you read her review, you'll see that even she's labelled it as a standalone math curriculum for all grade levels.
Great. Yeah, and if I'm sure, hopefully everyone knows Kathy Duffy Reviews. If not,
Yeah.
it's www.kathyduffyreviews.com, and you know, she is a partner with the co-op as well. So, okay. Any last questions before we say? Well, it's actually good morning, I guess, for Nadim, but good
I'm
night
sorry
for
about
us.
the time difference, but
Yeah, no worries. So. Okay, well, everyone have a wonderful evening, and thanks again. We will have a few more webinars in October, but then we're going to wrap up our webinar season, and then we'll launch some more in January. So,
thank you.
all right, have a great night.
See you guys.
Bye.